We're talking with Greg Gurenlian. Greg, I want to ask you the first question that may be a little bit out of the box, but it's interesting, I think. If anybody looks at you, they see, bodybuilder, all kinds of guy in the weight room. They see this big, strong guy. Certainly your nickname is the Beast. That's what now your degree from Penn State is in kinesiology.
Correct.
So what I want to know is face-offs, is it science or is it athleticism and brute strength? Because with the degree in kinesiology, to me, you've got to have broken this thing down into a science.
Yeah, no, it's definitely scientific. The one defining thing about face-offs that's different than the rest of our sport is consistency. The ball is always in the same spot. You're always lining up the same way. So in 2012, when I created the FOA system, it was based on science for the first time. We broke the angles down, and that's where we really took off.
Okay, and is it a matter of biomechanics? Is it a matter of studying it?
Yeah, biomechanics. For instance, I tell kids all the time, they can send me a video of them doing a couple reps of their first move to some cadence, and I can give them basically all of the physical things they're doing incorrectly and help them, put their leverage in the right spot, transfer their weight differently, cut down the angles quicker. So, everyone's always looking for the physical aspect of how can I make my hands faster? And I said, it's not about that. Because if it was just about that, then every blackjack dealer in Vegas, every cup stacker in the world would be a great face-off man. The question is what am I doing inefficiently on the whistle that's making me take longer from the time I hear the whistle to get to my move? So what we do for the most part is cut down wasted movement, and we use biomechanics to do that.
Is something you did at Penn State, or is it something that came later?
That's a great question. When I started playing lacrosse, it was in high school. So I was still very raw, and I wasn't a face-off, get-off guy in college. I played man up. I played midi. I didn't become a face-off specific guy until the pros. So I was still figuring the stance out. I blew my knee out in 2011. And after I did that, I spent that entire summer breaking down the face-off position on film. And I said, look, if I'm going to play this game and do this and come back, I want to do this as well as I can. So I applied all the things I use as a strength coach, because I was a USAW, which means I'm a USA weightlifting certified coach. So when you break down Olympic lifts for athletes, you use all biomechanics and you break it down on film. So I did the same thing for face-offs, and I created a system that was based on that. It was all about, weight distribution, leverage, and getting efficient technique on the whistle. Yes, athleticism helps a lot. In fact, most of my system was based on wrestling, because that's what I loved wrestling growing up, and that helped a lot. So when our system came out, people were really weirded out by it, because we were the first people to teach face-offs without teaching cheating. And we showed kids, look, we're going to get rid of cheating at this position, and we're going to show you how you can be great without it. And we used science.
Welcome back to show number 11 for the Michigan Lacrosse Review. We are talking to probably the best face-off guy in lacrosse history, and Greg Gurenlian. And Greg, I really appreciate you coming aboard. And easiest place to start sometimes is to go back to the beginning. So for you, all the way back to Springfield Township, Pennsylvania, talk a little bit about, most of the guys we've had on the show come from Long Island, come from real hotbeds. Talk a little bit about your background and when you started in high school.
Yeah, thank you. I started my freshman year in high school. It was a sport that was the biggest in Delaware County. Lacrosse is king, and it was our number one sport. But I was never allowed to play football or anything like that. I had Osgood slaughters growing up. Whoa. My parents, my doctor wouldn't let me play football, but I played pretty much everything else under the sun. But I wanted to play a sport where I could hit people. And honestly, I started playing lacrosse because I just wanted to be one of the cool kids. And I was just used to being an athletic kid that could be good at stuff. And lacrosse was the first time in my life where my athleticism wasn't the defining factor. My skill with the stick was. So I had to do a lot of catch up. And I actually got made fun of relentlessly every single day. And that's one of the reasons I got the nickname The Beast my freshman year. I didn't know how to really play lacrosse. So I just ran around constantly on ground balls trying to hit everybody I could. And the older guys would yell "beast" when they would watch the JV games. And that's kind of how I got the nickname as a joke. And I almost quit. I couldn't take it anymore at the end of the year. I was like, this isn't for me. And on the last day of practice, Coach Rick Johnson, assistant, he now lives in Bellefonte, Pennsylvania. He put his arm around me, and he didn't know I was going to quit. He just told me after practice, he said, you win every sprint. You work so hard. I promise you, if you stick with this game, that you'll light the world on fire. And literally, I went back to my house that night, and I told my dad, I was like, actually, I'm not going to quit. I was like, I can do this. So I stuck with it. And I was that kid at parties who was cradling with his lacrosse stick. I was the kid who was walking around all the time with it, and I wanted to be good at it. And I came back, and it changed, and I got good. I never, ever imagined that I would start playing in college until I got my first recruiting letter right before my senior year, though. For me, it was just a great release to play a game that was physical and brutal. It used to be much more brutal, as you know. So I enjoyed it.
I have a T-shirt that says it's about speed, not about brute, and I wear that because it's a speed game. It's not. Football players come out all the time, and I'm an old football coach, and they don't last very long because it's one of the few sports left that small guys can still have a big impact. Did your assistant coach? Did you ever tell him that story at any?
Yeah, I told him that. We meet every year because he started the State College Pennsylvania program, and he also is now the Bellefonte coach. And I see him every year at LaxCon. Whenever I get up to Penn State, I try to see him. And I remember right before I retired, I had done an interview and I told that story. And I saw him at LaxCon 2 years ago, and I told him, I appreciate it, because he was standing next to a couple of players who came with him. And I said, listen to everything this man says. He never played lacrosse. He just understands people, and he's a great coach. So I made sure he knew it. Sometimes
there's defining moments that we don't even know hit us until weeks, months, years later. That's a great story. Did your medical condition relate to what? Were you a muscle bound kind of larger guy? And I don't know muscle bound, but physically imposing figure in high school, or was it because of your medical condition that you decided to hit the weights?
I hit the weights like every other high school guy hits the weights. He wants to be big, strong, and get chicks. And we always laugh now, because now that I'm actually a bigger guy, the only people who really compliment you are other guys in the gym. But when I went to Penn State, when I graduated high school, I weighed about 170.
Okay.
And I couldn't bench 135. I just did, whatever workouts I saw on, in Men's Health and Men's Fitness. I tried to work out every day. I thought I knew what I was talking about. I got to Penn State and learned very harshly that I had no clue what I was doing. But yeah, they put me on 10,000 calories a day at Penn State, and I gained about 10 pounds a year. So I went in at about 170. I came out at 210.
Okay. Good size linebacker. You're about what, 6'1"?
6'1", 225. Yeah.
So Penn State gets in the picture because they were looking for face-off guys. You were obviously.
No, I honestly, my entire family went to Penn State on my dad's side.
Okay.
So my aunts and uncles, my cousins, I was going to Penn State football games since I was 6, and I was obsessed with Penn State football. I loved college football way more than pro football. And when I got my first recruiting letter in the summer, June of my going into my senior year, and my whole family were like, "Whoa, like I could play college lacrosse." Like it never dawned on us. And I went to a couple tournaments that summer. Back then you would go to Top 205 and Champ Camp. Those were it, really. Right. And I made the All-Star game at both of them. And it was almost like everyone knew, like, you make the All-Star game at these tournaments, you're going to college. And I remember getting my first recruiting letter from Coach Lars Tiffany when he was the assistant at Penn State, and literally freaking out because I knew nothing about Penn State lacrosse. I had no clue what it was like. I didn't know a single person on the team. I had just started watching lacrosse. I watched the Final Four for the first time in like my freshman or sophomore year of high school. But I was just like, Dad, this is a way for me to get to Penn State. I was an okay student. I 3.3 GPA, but I wasn't, someone who was like, I can go to any school I want to go to. So that's when my dad immediately went from like, okay, you're going to use played against sports, helmets and sticks, to this is an investment. What do you need? Um, so yeah, that's how it happened. Penn State really had me all along, unless something drastic happened. So yeah, it was like a dream come true. Getting a chance to go to my dream school was kind of the path. I didn't know anything about Penn State lacrosse.
The resurgence in the last 3 or 4 years has got to make your heart happy, because they've become, the Big Ten, I think, is the best conference in the country, and it's arguable, certainly, but they've done such a good job of recruiting. And talk a little bit about, obviously as a graduate, it's got to make you happy to see them do so well.
Oh God, I'm obsessed with Penn State. So as an alumni, I run the Faceoff Academy, of course, but I always try my best to egg my top guys to go to Penn State. And I pay attention to everything they do. We have a massive alumni group chat. We talk about everything. When they always used to get recruits like me, they would get guys who were decent athletes, raw athletes who had a chip on their shoulder, especially Philly guys. We always had a chip on our shoulder because we weren't considered the Long Island or the Maryland. And we would always be like 11, 12 in the country. We would pull it off by being just superior athletes, but not refined lacrosse players. Then when Tambo got hired, that's when the recruiting changed. So now you have a guy who is now getting some of the top players in the country on top of all the things Penn State had to offer to a recruit. So you weren't just getting Big Ten, football fans. You were getting refined lacrosse players who grew up in Penn State families, like Grant Ament, Gerard Arceri, these guys. So it made a huge difference in recruiting for sure. And we love it. The new stadium is gorgeous. Like the AD, Sandy Barber, is a huge lacrosse person. She's from Maryland originally, and she's been phenomenal. So yeah, it's been great.
Should point out to folks that don't know a lot about Philly, this is one of the few places where they threw snowballs at Santa Claus back in the day. So it's a rough and tumble town if you're not real familiar with the sports.
Look, man, if you're gonna come to an Eagles game as Santa Claus, don't show up late and don't show up hungover, or you're getting snowballs.
You graduated in 2006, 2008, actually into 2009. A guy named Brian Hennigan from Detroit, Brother Rice, face-off guy, was recruited. My high school team had to play him for 4 years. Yeah, and I had a really good face-off guy who actually went back east and played. And it was they've always had great face-off guys. And I think you're still, if I'm not mistaken, you're still the all-time face-off leader at Penn State, right?
Actually, so Charlie Hennigan, his older brother, came and played as a freshman when I was a senior, and then Danny came after him. And because of the added games, so they got to play 2 or 3 more games because of the Big Ten tournament, or I'm sorry, what were they in the CAA tournament?
Yeah.
Danny actually, on the last game of his career, broke my wins record by 1 in the tournament, because they made the tournament that year against Yale. And then Gerard Arceri came in and beat both of our records. So Gerard Arceri is the all-time leader now.
Okay. We had, not that this matters, but we had played them in 2008, and of course Brother Rice hadn't gotten beaten. Only been beaten once, I think, in the last 14 years in Michigan. And we got into overtime, and my face-off guy actually beat him on a face-off in overtime. We went down on the break, hit the pipe. They, of course, turned right around and go down the field and score. But the fact that they had actually played I was new to the school, and the fact that we could actually take them to something. But that team and those players, it was a really good player. Yeah. What did you, Lars? I didn't realize, we just interviewed Lars. He'd mentioned Penn State, but I didn't realize he was there when you were there.
Yeah, he was the defensive coordinator, and he recruited me, and then he left my junior year to go to Stony Brook, and he was the head coach at Stony Brook, and they beat us both years he was there. And the 2 years before he went there, we used to crush them, and then he beat us 2 years, and then he moved on to Brown after that. But yes, Lars shaped a lot of the Penn State culture early on, for sure. His character, his charisma, and his blue collar attitude are very ingrained. He fit along really well with Penn State.
In hindsight, did you know then? Maybe you didn't, but did you have an idea that this was a guy who was going to go places?
Oh yeah. We were actually, when he left, we were heartbroken. We thought that he was going to eventually be the new head coach one day at Penn State. So when he went to Stony Brook, we were like, well, wherever he goes, they're just going to be a powerhouse. Like, he's got it. Like, we knew. You can tell from Lars just meeting him for a couple of minutes that he's special. So there was no shock to us. It was just a matter of time before he started turning a program into an absolute powerhouse.
this is completely unrelated, but are you really happy to watching the lacrosse teams in the Big Ten adopt football helmet, the stripe and Michigan's wings? Was that something that you didn't have that? I don't think in your day, did you?
No, when I was at Penn State and Joe was the head coach for the football team, and Glenn was the head coach for lacrosse, it was like we didn't have any interaction at all. I think honestly that's why Ohio State recruits so well, because the football team and lacrosse team are like this. They get along so well. It helps. It's not like that at Penn State. Football is very separate, and the lacrosse program has their own thing. And I think, yes, the alumni want the white helmet with the blue stripe. I kind of like the fact that Tambroni he wants lacrosse to be their own thing. We don't, we're not a football program. We
Right.
want our own traditions. So they're not going that route with the helmets and stuff, which I'm all for. I like lacrosse have its own traditions. Football can have theirs. And, but yeah, I mean, you can see it especially new programs like Michigan, right? Let's use our great football tradition to try to get recruits coming here and get them excited. But I don't think Penn State needs to do that. I think they've established themselves with lacrosse for sure.
Okay. What in college was a thought of playing pro? And I say this from the standpoint that even pro lacrosse players, with maybe the exception of the PLL, now could you make a living at it coming out? I know enough guys that played, and so my question is: kinesiology degree. What was it that you wanted to do if you weren't going to play lacrosse?
I got to Penn State I had two gym teachers who went to Penn State when I was in high school, and I thought they had the greatest job ever. And I was like, man, I want to be like a health and gym teacher. So I got a phys ed program. I went to phys ed as soon as I got to Penn State, and I had no idea how hard the phys ed program at Pennsylvania State was. I could not believe it. So I quickly realized, they explained to us, you're going to go through this insanely tough program, but the odds of getting a nice, long, cushy gym coach job in high school is so minute in the sector when you graduate. And I met my strength coach, Brad Pantal, who was incredible. And after my freshman year, I switched majors to movement science within kinesiology because I was like, I want to be a strength coach. Like, this is amazing. But we took all the same courses as the pre-med kids. It was insanely tough. But I'm glad I did it. And my goal was to work at Penn State, which I did. I worked at Penn State under him for men's and women's basketball as a strength coach. And then I was going to become a grad assistant. And then hopefully my goal was to go to a SEC or Big Ten school and be a strength coach one day. And just by chance, a guy I played with lived in New York City and he worked at Reebok Sports Club. And he's like, look, before you decide you want to do all those things, he's like, just come check out the private sector in New York. He's like, we're completely overqualified as Penn State grads. You can go, you can make good money, you can live in New York City. So I went on an interview and I got the job, and like on a whim, I just moved to New York City and did that. Strength training was my number one passion. And until I blew my knee out, I was a full-time strength coach, and I just played lacrosse on the weekends in the MLL. I never took lacrosse as serious as I did until I got hurt. And the thought of it, like not being able to play again, kind of creeped into my mind.
I look at I come from a family of teachers, and you think of the pandemic and everybody's learning virtually. And I have two cousins who are phys ed teachers. I know them to be great teachers. And not just, we have this tendency of sometimes thinking, you throw the balls in the middle of the room and everybody goes. That's 1% of PE teachers. 99% of them teach physical education the way chemistry teachers teach chemistry.
Exactly.
But what happens in the virtual world? So he let me come over and I watched for 20 minutes and watching with his interaction with students. So it was making sure the kids had routines and making sure kids had understanding of doing some things. Some kids were more active than others, but he was as active in the virtual world as he was in the classroom. And I didn't.
That's a great point. I never even thought about the phys ed teachers right now.
Right.
Wow.
You think they sit home and the individual training, and in this case, they're actually able to have more impact on the curriculum, because now the kids, it's not just a matter of showing it. They got to go home. And what my cousin was doing is they were doing kettlebells. So he was going through the kids and making sure, and really like a pound or two, right?
Yeah.
He would have them demonstrate. After he'd explain it the next week, they'd have to go back and demonstrate that they understood the technique.
That's awesome.
Online. And now, like you said, I have 700 kids. I got to go through 700 demonstrations. And he made the point. He says, "I would love to have been able to record some of this." He says, "Because I could have made a blooper film with some of the stuff he's getting wrong."
Yeah,
But
teaching a dip hinge is not an easy thing.
well, there's teaching and then there's education, and I think that's kind of the point that he was making. From college, then obviously your first opportunity to play professional was in the MLL for Rochester, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, Guy Van Arsdale came over and replaced Lars, and when he got there my junior year, it was kind of a turning around moment for me, because up till then we rotated 3 or 4 face-off guys. I was kind of the starter, but I was still playing midi. I didn't really know where I fit in. I was trying my best. Guy showed up. First thing he ever said to me, he's like, "I've seen you on film, and you are a face-off guy, and you go out and you do your thing, and you have my full confidence." Oh man, okay, that's new. And my junior year, crushed it, 3rd in the country, and did my thing, and that's where things took off. When I got that first recruiting, when I got the first letter, I came in for practice my senior year. There's a letter there from the MLL just saying, you're invited to the combine, because back then we used to do a combine, and Guy Van Arsdale was a former head coach of the Rochester Rattlers, and he had put in a great word for me. So we went out to the combine, and I did well in the game and all that stuff, and we had interviews with all the teams, and the Rochester Rattlers picked me up. And the idea of playing pro was so beyond my comprehension, because when I played lacrosse, the first dudes I ever watched were Gary and Paul Gate. I used to go to the Wings games on Friday nights, and that's what everyone in Philly did. And, you'd have like signed Gary Gate balls for $5 sitting in like the merchandise thing. And the idea that I was going to go on a field and be on the same field as guys like this, Casey Powell's on the field, John Grant, I'm like, this is ridiculous. I shouldn't even be here. And in my first game, I scored within 5 seconds, and we won the game. And I went over 50%, and Kevin Cassis and I are like chatting it up, having a beer after the game. And I remember telling my dad, I'm like, this is ridiculous. But I realized that first game, I was like, wow, I can do this. I belong here. And that's where it really took off. And I just had fun with it, because I was still figuring this out. I wasn't a face-off guy only in my whole life. So the idea that I'm just going to play probably a total of 1.5 minutes a game, but take 28 face-offs was new, but it was so exciting. So I loved it. Plus we got to play the ML rules, which was fast-paced shot clock, 2-point arc. I was like, this is the kind of lacrosse. Like, I could never go back to any other lacrosse after this. So it was pretty cool. Explain
maybe to the folks even now, you would have probably made more money as a strength coach at a university than you were making playing professional lacrosse. Is that fair?
Yeah. So just so people know, when I got into the league in 2006, it was the same cap. So 16 grand was the max contract. And, only a couple guys got that. And that was in 2006. When I retired in 2017, the max contract was the same. The only difference was we were playing more games.
Right.
So when people ask, why did the PLL show up? That's one of the reasons, because now the ML guys can get $40,000, $50,000. So a little competition goes a long way. But yeah, so I was essentially in the red, because I was working as a strength coach and as a bouncer in Penn State, driving on weekends up to Rochester, playing the games, getting in my car, driving all the way back so I could get back to work. And I remember being like, I don't know how long I could sustain this. So I never took face-offs too much seriously than that. But here's the difference. You as a professional lacrosse player, I realized if you work on your own brand and you do a good job, you can definitely make a full-time living in the camp clinic world as well as endorsements. So in 2006, that wasn't a thing. Everybody was a gym teacher, a finance guy, whatever. By the time I retired, 80% of pro lacrosse guys do some kind of camp or clinic business and or have some kind of other job on top of that.
Yeah.
And with the endorsements, you can make a good living. So that's the difference. Even though the pay wasn't huge, the difference in your model of life was definitely different, because you could leverage your popularity with the fact that you were good at coaching it. So that's where Faceoff Academy changed my life, because I was able to leverage my popularity and then show how good I was at coaching something. And that's where it changed.
I have a goalie friend that we both know, and he was a backup goalie for one of the teams. You got X amount for the travel. You got X amount to play in a game as a backup. And in particular, they played a Friday-Sunday series, Friday night, Sunday. goalie, the starting goalie, got kind of hurt on Friday. They flew up to San Francisco to play, and they didn't put the backup goalie in, even though the starting goalie's hand was mangled, because they'd had to pay him an extra $500 to coming back. And he was hoping to pick up the extra $500 because he had some other car bills that he had. So he literally had to get back on Monday and call his dad to borrow. He's just out of college, right? And he, and you think, well, that's literally chump change or meal money for almost every other professional sport.
Yep.
But that's kind of how the sport's grown, and that's sometimes we forget those rules and those processes. But it's I think it's changing.
It is, and you know what? It's funny. David Gross, when he was a commissioner at MLL, he said one of the truest things I ever heard. We were at the combine right before the draft. He said, "Look, one day someone's going to get drafted number 1 in this sport, and they're going to be paid $1 million, and they're not going to give a crap about you guys. That's what being a pioneer is about, and you have to accept that if you're going to do this." It was very honest and raw and true, and it's the truth. Our sport is very fickle, man. I've been retired for 1 summer, and I already got kids asking me who I used to play for. So it's a very humbling experience in our sport. But because of PLL, the PLL has done a massive job of optics and social media reach, and their goal is to make players feel like professionals so that the world sees us as professionals, and endorsements come in and it changes the view, and it has made a massive difference. The 2 leagues, I love them both. The 2 leagues do their own thing separately, differently, but it's raised the pay for players. It's raised the viewership overall. It's definitely changed the game. The PLL has made a massive difference.
On this show a few weeks ago, Bill Turney made the comment to Trevor Baptiste. He says, "And better enjoy the next 5 years." And he was explaining that Trevor kind of gave him a quizzical look, and he said, "Well, you better enjoy the next 5 years, because in 5 years they won't remember you." And there's probably more truth to that than fiction.
Yeah,
it kind of goes through the process. Now, for Rochester, you end up in San Francisco. How do you live in San Francisco on a face-off salary, or is it one of those you flew in and played and flew out?
Boy, yeah, that's so. When I remember the Rattlers my second year drafted Alex Smith, who can fault them, right? He came off a great career, and I was sitting here like, dude, I did have a pretty good rookie year. But I remember calling the coaching staff, and I was just like, look, I told BJ, there's no reason for us both to be here. So why don't you just trade me and see what you can get for me? And then that way I can play, because I know I can face off in this league. And to his credit, he was very gracious. He was like, I totally understand. He goes, but what we want to do is try you at a couple other things. We want to try you as a two-way midi. We think you can help us on offense. Okay, man. So we went out there 1 game. We played out in Denver. I played two-way midi. I played on the wings. I had a couple offensive runs, but I was like, this is just not. I was like, I'm not an MLL level offensive player. Like, I'm a face-off guy. Right. And they agreed to trade me, and San Fran picked me up. But the deal was, San Francisco back then, Doug Locker was the GM, and Mark Blake was one of the owners, and they knew that to get East Coast talent, they had to spend more than everybody else. So they offered to bring me over, get me a job as a coach somewhere, and live in San Francisco. But my personal business, I started a company called Brolic Strength, was just taking off, and I was doing a good job. And I was like, look, I'll fly in on weekends. That's all I can do. So they flew me in every Friday morning. We played, and I flew back either on a red eye or I flew back Sunday morning every single weekend. And we played in the Western Conference back then. So it was us, Chicago, Denver, and the LA. So I was flying to one of those cities every week. We got 1 East Coast game a year. And to their credit, they treated me like a pro. I loved playing for that team. I was heartbroken when that team closed. But that's why you see Adrenaline, Legends, all these lacrosse programs and companies now exist because of that influx of LA and San Francisco guys that all moved. Kyle Harrison, all those guys flew out to the West and stayed there and built lacrosse up. So that's why it started, because the ML had 2 teams out there. But I played for them, and I played really well. Then I had 1 game against Long Island on the East Coast against Pete Vlahakis and the Lizards. And I still remember it was the best game of my life. Went 31 for 41 with 22 ground balls and 3 goals. And after that game, the team closed, and I spent a year on the shelf. because the league, because of the recession,
Yep.
took everybody in a player pool and then reassessed rosters and just made 6 teams again. And I was left out in the cold, and I didn't have a team to play for all of 2009. And then the Lizards picked me up in the supplemental draft because they remembered that game. And if they hadn't done that, then no one ever would have heard of me again. So, I give Joe Spalina and Jim Ulet a ton of credit for that.
You had stops in Chicago, I think, too, in Toronto. Am I not mistaken?
Well, the problem was they didn't have like a stud face-off guy anywhere to put, so they put me on Toronto. But Toronto was like, look, we're just going to be honest with you. This is going to be all Canadian guys.
Right.
So they took Jeff Snyder and kind of did that. So then Chicago just picked me up. And at the time, I had been talking to Boston about coming over there because I was like, I need it to be a close team. I can't do this West Coast thing anymore. Chicago picked me up. And I was like, look, I can't play for you guys. I'm building a business in New York. They didn't want to hear it. So they literally put me on the do not report list the entire year and wouldn't trade me to any team. So that's why I sat on without a roster. So it says that I played for Toronto and Chicago, but I never played. And Chicago refused to trade me to anybody who asked. Denver tried multiple times, but they wouldn't trade me. So that's how that happened.
A bunch of Detroit guys, both first-class guys and guys that were sort of hangers on. I'm not even sure that's a word. A lot of guys who went through that roster as practice players and things of that nature. And to this day, they'll put their, they practiced once in 2011, but yet they sell themselves like they were members of the Chicago Machine. I'm not sure they ever maybe got a practice jersey.
Yeah, we have a rule: if a guy shows up to a tournament with an MLL helmet, then he didn't play.
Yeah. No. Yeah. Those who know, and those who don't should stay home. I certainly get that deal. As a high school and college coach, it's especially on the high school side. Some people say, "Oh, by the way, there's this kid that just moved in from wherever, right? He's an exchange student or he's a transfer in." And you always, not once have I ever had a state champion show up. It's always, great kids, but not necessarily you're the basketball coach. The kid walks in, he's 5'3". You're hoping he's going to be. Yeah. The jokes used to be that our neighboring high school, the kids that were football players were 6'5", and unfortunately, all the 300-pound kids at our school were 5'6". So you kind of move forward. I want to talk a little bit about the Faceoff Academy, but talk about, you kind of came out of retirement to get involved in the PLL, and I have 2 questions. You started these businesses at that point. Did you have a business mentor within the lacrosse community that sort of gave you some ways? And then the follow-up to that is that one of the reasons that it helps you come out of retirement for the PLL because you like to play, but more importantly, because it gives visibility to the companies that you're trying to get off the ground?
Yeah, those are good questions. So when I was a strength trainer, the issue was in the private sector was in New York City, most of your clientele leaves during the summer. They go to the Hamptons, they travel, whatever. Right. So in the summer, my income would take a massive hit. And I would always be looking for, I would do classes in the park. I would do all kinds of stuff in Central Park, but I couldn't find a way to keep the stream going. But I was starting to get notoriety as a face-off guy. And I remember after I blew my knee out, I wrote this system up. And I came back in 2012 early from a knee injury and set all my personal records and nearly broke, ML records. And I was like, oh man, there's definitely something to what I'm teaching. So I went to Jerry Raganese, who I had met and become friends with, and he had started to break into the MLL as well, and Chris Mattis. And I said, yo, like right now, lacrosse forums is huge. I was like, why don't we do something like that, but just for face-off guys? Because the most visited thread is face-offs. Let's create a website, call it whatever. I think I forget what we were going to call it, Lacrosse University or Faceoff University or something. And they convinced me, let's just go on a clinic tour. Let's just teach what you're teaching. We'll make it a system. And that way we can make money during the summer, have fun. And we really wanted to get rid of cheating. So we were like, if we could start teaching kids to not cheat, maybe this position won't be as much of a laughing stock, because it really irked me that no matter how good I played, people always like, yeah, but they're just the best cheaters.
You're a Fogo.
Yeah. So we went out and we started doing a series of clinics in 2012, and they were such a huge hit that people were asking us to come back all the time. So we created a full website. We started doing clinics all the time. Then we started doing weekly draw days. And next thing we knew, guys that we were coaching were killing everybody. Trevor took off. We worked with Syracuse. Daddio had a really tough year, and then we worked with Syracuse and Daddio down the second half of the stretch in the senior year. If you compare the stats, they were night and day. So we're like, wow, we're really onto something. So we went full tilt into the Faceoff Academy, and I ended up selling Brawlic Strength because I didn't have time to work with my clients anymore. And that's when it really took off. And once we had that going, people were always asking me like, oh, why don't you try this? Or what are you doing business model wise? I was like, look, I don't have a business degree, and I don't have anybody as a mentor really. We literally made these decisions, the three of us, as just like gut checks. Some stuff worked out, some stuff didn't. Most of the time it worked out exactly the way we thought it would. So when we created the national showcase, I said, if we create a national showcase where we bring all the best face-off guys in the country under one roof for a weekend and we make it feel like a Super Bowl, I was like, we'll really be onto something. We can start really printing kids checks to college. I was like, we can help these kids go anywhere they want if they do this. So that's when it was done. It was like a done deal because we spent so much time on it.
Interpersonal skills for a strength coach have to be as strong as understanding strength and conditioning and the rest of it, because you have to sell yourself to every client that you're a part of that process. Is it something you learned? Is it what you learned at home? And then the follow-up to that would be, is that you're a very articulate guy. That certainly helps the process. Was that part of that deal, or is that you just, as you get better at something, you just understand it better?
Man, no one's ever asked me that question, and it's a great question. The grind, I hate the fitness industry. I hate it. I was a learned strength coach that was used to a very specific style of world where I spoke, you listen, we work hard, and we're all in this together, to a place where the flashier and crazier an exercise was, the more clients you would get. And I carved out a niche in New York City at that time, before there were really training gyms, of give me in this Reebok Sports Club where all these people, have money and they're starstruck. Give me the people that used to be athletes. Give me the Harvard track captain from 1998. Give me the women in the building that want to be empowered and want to do Olympic lifts, not the ones who want to dance around on a yoga ball. Right. And I carved out this really dedicated group of people. And what I decided was, I'm going to take these people, I'm going to give my company a name inside this building. And then I'm going to take these people out, and we're going to become a community. And that was my goal. We were all on an email list together. We would do 3 times a year. We would have meet and greets. We would all get to know each other. I did Brawlic in the park where everyone could come for free, and we would just do a cross training thing for free in the park. And everyone became friends. We all ended up going to each other's weddings and everyone. So it was a very tight community. And when we started the FOA, it was easier for me because you and I show up in New York City and we have to tell somebody why I'm a better strength trainer than you, right? They don't know you or me from a hole in the wall. In the lacrosse world, people knew who I was, and I had proven it on the field. So when you said, oh, Faceoff clinic with Gurenlian, like, of course I'll go. And I wasn't used to that. I was like, wow, that's a layup. And now when you get here, you get there because I'm Greg, but I'm going to prove to you I'm going to make you better. And we were the rare combination of creating a community, right? When the Faceoff Academy, when you come to National Showcase, you only get invited if we've trained you before. So it's quality control. So you have 250 kids in a building that we've all coached. And we hear it every year. The people talk about, oh, the kids are so well-mannered. The parents all get along. And I always say, like, if you're a jerk, you're not going to get along with me. So you're going to get out, you can go train with somebody else. And I feel like we've created community within the Faceoff Academy. And that's what the difference was. So when kids would come to me naturally, because I was who I was, I already had that street cred. And then I just applied what I learned from being a small business owner with strength training. Right. And I created a community. And I think Jerry and Chris and I worked very diligently at that, at keeping our reputation high, keeping the bar high for the way we present ourselves, and always over delivering with everything we do, because it's been real simple. We ask ourselves every day, what would I have wanted if I was a kid? That's it. Right. And just answer that question with what you do. So that's helped. You're right. The Brawlic strength experience really carved the way so that I could have a blueprint.
You realize that Faceoff guys now have more respect than they did even when I was playing it. I'm an old guy. I'm 66. So Faceoffs were a whole different monster back then. Of course, I'm a Canadian inside guy, so it's a little bit different. Now you can't be successful without having a Faceoff guy. and universities are giving partial scholarships, again, 12.5 for each school. They're giving, Fogo is no longer a disrespected work. But let me answer this question. You have this academy. You certainly have been in Michigan here plenty of times. You're a high school coach. Maybe you know a little bit about goaltending. I can watch your videos, but what do I start when I literally have never had any face-off background, and I want to build a program within my high school, my middle school, whatever it might be? Where do I start?
Yeah, great question. And that's one of the main things that we focused on. Before we started, people used to be like, oh, these are secrets to, I'm holding them in chest. Like some coaches won't even let like coaches or parents on the field. Like they only, keep it because I don't want people taking my money. For us, we were like, this isn't our sport. We don't own this. So we would have free coaches clinics. Every city we go to, we have an option for whoever's hosting us for a free 30-minute coaches and officials clinic that we'll do before any event. I would say 10% of people take us up on it, which is a shocker. But our goal is to, if I'm going to teach a kid and I'm going to see him in Michigan 4 times a year, what benefit does he get if his coaches don't understand the value or can't reinforce what I'm teaching?
Right.
We have enough respect for ourselves to know that people will still want us back, even if they know some of the stuff we know. So our goal is to educate the coaches so that they appreciate what we're teaching and there's not animosity, because I feel like that is one of the big issues with the rule change committee every 2 years is there's definitely animosity in the college lacrosse world for what we do. I don't understand face-offs. These guys are making money on it and then they get sent here and now, and I don't know what to do with them. Right. So we go out of our way. We coach college programs for free. We coach the staffs, everything. So where you start is that's why we've created the YouTube channel, youtube.com/Gurenlian. It's the Beast Lab. Literally, you go on there and it has everything you need. You just go video by video and it teaches you, especially with the standing neutral grip, because there's only like 3 of us in all of lacrosse who have done it this way recently with the new rules. And we felt like it was our duty to make sure that we shared this information because there's a lot of people out there trying to make a quick buck who are teaching it wrong. So, what you do is you go to the website and then you bring FOA out to your event. You host a FOA either at your school or your club program. We come out there, you take in the free 30-minute clinic, then you watch and take notes on what we teach. And then now you're empowered with the ability to help your players progress. And it's at no cost to you.
I've got 40 kids standing in front of me. I'm a high school coach. I don't have this elite program. Am I looking for somebody specific within that group, or is it just somebody who migrates to that? And I answer. Let me ask the question, because to me, I'm a goaltender. Grew up as a goaltender. I don't put kids in the net who are the worst players. I put a kid in the net who's appropriate. In other words, a kid who's not afraid of the ball, who can see the ball. And the hockey model is that we grew up skating at a young age. You were the fat kid in the neighborhood at 7. By the time you got to 14, you were the best skater because you spent more time on the ice than everybody else. And I think putting somebody in goal that is not equipped, I think it's a very specific position. And I don't think most high school coaches understand that. They put a kid who thinks he can catch the ball best. I'm going to convert an attack because, he catches well, which is insane to me as a veteran coach. So now I got 40 kids in front of me. Am I looking for a specific, whether it's body type, whether it's, give us some hints.
Okay. So if this was 2 years ago, I would have said yes. First thing you do is you find the wrestler in the group. How many of you guys wrestle? 2 or 3. Okay. Come on over here. You guys know how to distribute your weight from your feet to your hands. Everyone else doesn't. So we're going to start with you guys.
Okay.
Then we go to the kids who wants to try. I always told coaches, any kid who wants to try.
Right.
Then you take your best LSM, bring him over. So now you have your best LSM. And the problem is you're getting your butt kicked on face-offs. What happens? We put the long pole out there. Does he know how to face off? No. Okay. So he's just going to get crushed. Great. So you bring the LSM, and that's what I used to say. Now, with standing neutral grip being the new standard, what you do now is you let everybody face off. Like if I was a high school coach and I was doing tryouts, I'd be like, we're going to do a wide open face-off tournament today in practice. I'm going to blow whistles. Here's going to go best of 3 and see who shows up. Because here's the cool thing now with the new rules is you're going to see different styles of face-off guys, similar to how you have different styles of college quarterbacks. You're going to have guys who are counter experts who can shovel and stop anybody. You're going to have guys who are really quick with their hands and like to find their wings. You're going to have guys who love to pop the ball forward and force it. You're going to have guys who are really good at the rake and bodying up because they're two-way middies. So you allow everyone to try. and see one afterwards who has a knack for this, who wants to continue to do face-offs. You might get 10 out of the 40 kids. All right, so these 10 I'm going to keep an eye out for the next couple of days, and I'll work with them this week, and I'll see who really has. Next thing you know, there's 4 or 5 kids who are better than everybody, and they're excited about it. It's like, okay, now I have my group, and that will happen every single time. You're not going to have all 40 guys. You know, for right off the bat, the close defenders, they're not going to be face-off guys. You know, so. And I think it's never been a better time to have an LSM as a face-off guy. And I was working down in Maryland this past weekend, and there was a kid who plays for Madlax who's a 7th grader. And I was like, you could be the first college 70% LSM face-off guy if you want to be, because there's some kids who have a knack for it now. So yeah, that's what you would do now. You'd let everyone try. And I know it's not like an easy way to think about it, but you have to dwindle it down because you don't know. Someone who's 6'1", 225 could show up. And someone who's 5'10" and 180 pounds should show up. Size means nothing now. It's all about your diversity of your moves and your ability to stop what someone's good at.
I'm a film guy, and I took over a new high school 2 years ago. This would have been the 3rd season. Obviously, we're pandemic last year. It was a really good, solid high school face-off guy, but I wasn't really sure. So we started watching film, and we went for the first time. Somebody always used to say to me, well, you know, your goalies are always great. Well, that's because I have a goaltending background. Face-offs, we were always horrible. We'll get the ball back at some point. We had a first time I have a guy that's really pretty good at it. We went to your YouTube channel and we straightened some shoulders out. That's really all we did. And he went and he became dominant the last 8-9 games. And it was as crazy as it was pushing. It was the biomechanical part of the thing. And I thought, since we've got this new program and this kid is around 55%, well, he went 70, almost 80% the last 8-9 games. And part of it was that process of learning. So I can tell you firsthand that your system works. But then here's the other question. What's it cost a kid? If you're coming to Michigan, what's a typical cost for a camp or for an outing or a session? Because I think people think it's a lot more expensive than it is.
Yeah. Our standard is it's $100 for 2.5 hours.
Yeah.
And we always work with programs. You know, if a program wants to have us out and they're like, look, we don't really have enough, but okay, we'll still come out, man. If you get us 20 kids, we'll come out. We'll figure it out. I've always, you know, I'm the son of an electrician and a school teacher. Okay. I'm not a prep school kid who played lacrosse. I will never allow finances to stop a kid from learning this stuff. And which I think is our biggest problem in our sport right now. So, you know, that's what people have to understand. The flat rate generally is $100 for a 2.5 hour clinic. And you're going to get the best instruction on earth. Now, the difference is we tell kids, this isn't a one-time clinic. You now have our contact information. If you need something, we have kids Jerry and I were just talking about this yesterday. Like, people, you know, in any business, people are always counting your pennies, right? But we always joke. We're like, look, we're on the phone right now at 10 p.m. talking about how we can add a free extension to our showcase, right? And the amount of phone calls, text messages, free film breakdowns on email, like we do that stuff for our kids, because once you're part of the FO Army, like, we want to help you. So yeah, that's basically the cost of a clinic, but you get a lot with that.
Anybody that's watched you play knows you play with just absolute relentless zeal. Now, is it part Philly? Because that's just, we're people from Philly. That's just kind of the way the process is. And is that something that you look for in a face-off guy?
Yeah, I don't know where, you know, even my dad says, like, I don't know where the fire comes from. I felt like I lived my life with what we call next to speed, where you are always looking for the person next to you who's going to challenge you, and that keeps you going at full speed. And, you know, I have always believed that I don't teach anything I'm not an expert in. I don't open my mouth unless I'm fully aware, which I know is not a popular way to look at life right now in the world. So there's only two things I tell people about. One is strength training and the other is face-offs. And I tell my kids, I know everything about this one thing. I couldn't tell you how to brush your teeth, but I know, like, this thing, right? And the fire for me was to be as good as I could humanly be in a thing. And that's what I tell the kids. I never looked sideways. I always wanted to max my ceiling out. And my goal as a oldest of 4 and now a father is I have this big brother mentality of, if you can just experience being as good as you could humanly be at something in life, I can't even tell you how good of a feeling that is. And I want every kid I coach to feel that. So the passion comes from wanting to help these kids experience what I did. But the fire was just I loved the grind. Like when people ask me, like, what are you going to miss of lacrosse? I'm like, honestly, limping out to the face-off stripe, completely in pain and exhausted with your lungs on fire, and knowing that if you don't win this face-off, you're going to let your whole team down. That's what kept me playing for so long. That's what I obsessed over. And as sick and demented as that is, that's what I love.
I would be remiss. Almost every place you've ever played, you're always the ground ball leader. I mean, let's put in your face-off guy, but the ground ball part of that is also something I think is really important. I still think you hold a percentage, international face-off percentage for like 80%, 81% wins, which brings me to sort of my last question. 2018, you get to go to Israel as part of the national team. You played for pro teams, you played in college, you played for your alma mater that you have great respect for and love for. And then somebody says, by the way, we want you to put a flag on and carry the flag. And just talk a little bit about that experience, because it doesn't matter the sport and it doesn't matter who I've talked to. If you're playing for your country, all of a sudden, it just changes. And that's true even in the 92 basketball team with Jordan and all of the NBA All-Stars. Even they said that you're humbled by the flag. So talk a little bit about that experience going to Israel.
Yeah, I think, especially for me, it was a redemption moment. 2014, we lost, and I felt personally responsible for 4 years. And I didn't think I was going to get a chance to do this again. I didn't think I'd still be playing in 2018. And when the opportunity came across, not only to play and redeem what we had lost in 2014, but to do it with some of the core members. And then on top of it, I got to play with, one of our greatest students, and who's now become a great friend and a colleague in Trevor. So I have this face-off guy who's the next guy. It's kind of a torch, passing moment. My job is to do my work on the field, but also help him be successful for us, as well as a mentor who hasn't been in World Games before. And it was massive. It was a very emotional time. When we got there, I actually had 103-degree fever 2 days before we left. We weren't even sure. I had a massive upper respiratory infection. I was sick for most of my time over there. I didn't feel right till our first game against Canada, actually. I couldn't eat until then. So I hate the fact that it got screwed up by that. But no matter what you feel or how things are going, when you're standing out there on the field and they're playing the anthem, you don't feel anything other than, I have to be my absolute best at this moment for us, for this country. That's just the way it feels. And it doesn't matter if you're playing lacrosse or you're having a game in the backyard of ping pong. If you hear the anthem, and not just because of it's your country, but what you believe it should represent. So you have a moment, you have a 2-hour window of playing lacrosse in order to show the world what USA should represent: grit, diversity, effort, and being a champion. And that's what you feel when you're out there. So you have this crazy, weird ownership of, I can affect the way people look at our country, whether it's true or not. And when you go out there and you play an entire tournament and getting to do it every day, and then you come back and we would sit in lawn chairs, in blue Adirondack lawn chairs, and have the coaching staff spend 90% of our time learning about each other and our histories and getting to know each other rather than just X's and O's. That's how we got pulled together so quick. And that's how we were able to win it. So it was a really special time.
And my last question, and it's very apropos. Last week, you got yourself, not you, but you were pulled into a discussion here in Michigan. I'm a secretary of the Michigan High School Lacrosse Coaches Association. This show is a companion piece for All-Star and Hall of Fame conversations that we're having that we leave on YouTube, so people get to see what was before us.
Cool.
And about 3 months ago, the Federation put out some information as it relates to face-off in a pandemic. And the idea was that we'd have to go to altered in possession. Otherwise, the other alternative was not to play. One of our coaches here just jumped on it, is that we're eliminating face-offs permanently, and that was the end of the discussion, and that wasn't even close to being accurate. And it lit a firestorm like I've not seen on Twitter. There's nobody that plays lacrosse at any level that wants to eliminate face-offs. But if the choice, having last year three dates in, even my college team, my club my club team, we were on the way back from Ohio, having won 2 games in Ohio, and our AD says we're done.
Yeah.
So a bunch of coaches in Michigan who are on the executive committee, we just put out some ideas. We're not advocating no face-offs, but it was really a lot of misinformation.
Of course.
And from that standpoint. So in the pandemic, the pandemic may change what we do in the face-off. Have you thought about that? And we've worked out the logistics here locally with the coaches, because basically we got on the phone and said, shut the hell up, because you're just not.
Yeah, of course.
We're the only executive committee that recommended that to our state association, which sometimes is backwards in their process. And we just wanted to make sure they knew that we were doing every thing we could to make sure kids would stay safe. That said, do you think the pandemic changes anything about what we do long term?
No, I think, and I get roped into these all the time, you know, and the first sentence out of my first tweet is always, let's wait till information comes. But, because, every time I open Twitter and something like that happens, I go, oh, why do I have to say something?
That's why
but the reality of it is, when you look at it logistically, there's all that other stuff, right? Does that mean you can't face guard guys? Does that mean we can't be in the crease? Whatever. We figured it out with the Faceoff Academy because we took time off. We were doing all virtual training, and all the parents are like, look, our 21s and our 22s have to get recruited. And now they changed the rules again, which of course no one ever asked me or any Faceoff guy when they change rules. What are we going to do in order to demonstrate this technique so my kid can go to college? So we had to think quick. So what do we do? All right, well, let's look at the CDC. Let's look at what makes sense. So what we did was, look, we're all doing temperature checks. We're all doing flyers. We're all doing, past COVID tests and all that stuff. You get on the field, our I-95 Cup was very simple. The referees wore a mask. They used an electronic whistle for the face-off. And all the kids had to wear a mask when they took a face-off. Real simple. And we told the officials, look, and we told the players, when the referee says down, go down right away so that you're not sitting in your stance. And if they have to adjust your head, that means you lose the face-off. You have never seen such a pristine lineup in your life, right? And this is what I always tell officials. This is why I don't understand why face-offs are hard to officiate. You have all the power. If you told me to face off left-handed and I laughed at you, but you called me for a false start, guess what? I'm facing off left-handed next time.
Exactly.
Message received. So it was clean and easy. And, when people are like, well, we can't use electronic whistle on the field, it's not loud enough. I'm like, yeah, after the face-off, just for the face-off. Then you can use a regular whistle for the rest of the field. All you do is for the face-off. And it worked great. Worked fine. So, that's why. But you know what? As far as the face-off is concerned, I'm in a very difficult position because I have the rules committee that wants to make rules, and a lot of the guys, whether they don't like me or whatever the personal issue is, don't want my input. And then I have the Lacrosse face-off Twitter and families, which you see is very passionate.
Yeah.
So when they changed the rules, we had to make a decision. Do we pander and do we go on Instagram and cry about it? Or do we immediately send out information on how to face off the new way? And when we did that, we got crushed by these people,
right?
But it made sense. So all the parents and kids, I hope this year learned a very good lesson. The 14 kids who got recruited in the 22 class for face-off guys were the kids who said, okay, that's how I got to do it. I'm not going to sit on Instagram and throw poop emojis. I'm going to go work. I think face-offs this way, standing neutral grip, are going to be here to stay. I think this is how high school and youth should do it. It's easier on the body. It's more diverse. It doesn't mangle your sticks. It's faster. It's cleaner. This will be the way face-offs should be from now on. But as far as the pandemic is concerned, if you mask up and you make the official use an electronic whistle for a year, who cares? It's perfectly fine.
I think some of the discussion comes from with blood in the water in relationship to a lot of state associations. We're actually having conversations about travel programs in a variety of sports taking over the high school programs, for-profit. And the guys that were the most vocal were usually the for-profit guys, the carpetbaggers, for lack of a better term. I have no problem with guys making money at their sport. God bless them. Same thing for me in ski racing in the wintertime. But sometimes in the sport, we still have a small percentage of folks who are less than scrupulous. And I think that's it. So we've been pretty vocal about trying to provide that. But listen, as a Michigan State Spartan, I've never had a whole lot of use for Nittany Lions. in Penn State. But you are such a terrific guy, and this is the first time I had a chance to talk to you, and I know from people who've gone to your clinics, I understand why you are as successful as you are. So I can only tell you, thank you so much for the time that you've spent. We'll make sure the Faceoff Academy is up on our website. And if you guys have any understanding of learning about Faceoff, this is the guy to talk to. So Greg, I can't tell you how much I've appreciated this conversation.
I appreciate it. Hopefully I get to see you next time I come out to Michigan.
Absolutely. We'll make sure that happens, and be safe. And if we have any more controversies about Faceoffs, you'll be the first guy I call.
Just shoot me a text. We'll keep it off Twitter.
All right.
Thanks a lot. Take care.
Thanks, Greg.